Welcome back. Tripartism and social dialogue. Renewed collective action from confrontation to convocation. These are some speaking points in a position paper developed by Mr. Keston Nancoo, who was returned as chairman of the Employers Consultative Association. Where are we in terms of social peace, the environment for it in Trinidad and Tobago? That's part of the frame for our discussion. Good morning, sir.
Hi, good morning, Andy, and good morning to listeners across Trinidad and Tobago and the World Wide Web.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to start by asking you, last week on the program, sitting where you were sitting, the guest was Professor Selwyn Kajua, and in the discussion about the state of affairs in the country, socially and otherwise, he was responding to the responses to Ansel Roger in his capacity as president of the Joint Trade Union Movement, who are saying that people in the business sector have no right telling workers how to behave. And it comes from the suggestions by yourself in the ECA, by other business organizations in the country, advising against the advisability of taking protest action, encouraging trade unions to go back to the table at the National Trade Union, at the National Tripartite Advisory Council. And that's his position. That
well, it's not, and it's not about employers or business against in any way employees or trade union movement from taking action, but it's no secret the harsh economic realities that this country is facing today. There is no way. It requires much more talking with rather than speaking against. And the forum for that is the tripart NTAC, as it is described now. It was very unfortunate that, although I appreciate the why, which would have brought them to one of the things that would have, as they claim, would have caused them to walk out, which is the culmination of the TDC and the way how that was handled.
And you all expressed disappointment with that, in the way which was handled as well.
Sure, we did, because, Andy, it is always the right time to do the right thing. And it's really a concern to me when I see supposedly intelligent adults doing things that run against the grain. So you wonder, we're at a stage where there's no room for egos. No room for egos. This is about Trinidad and Tobago. In order for us to come out of where we are, we need to find a mechanism which will allow us, which will facilitate a conversation that will help us to move forward. Again, in the piece I spoke about the vagueness of national interest, which we keep talking about all the time. But to my mind, it is really about what are the components of national interest? National interest is really contextual. So I see no reason why we cannot, as a people, more importantly the Tripartite Social Dialogue Forum, decide what are the most critical items that need to be placed on the agenda. You can't have more than three.
Otherwise it wouldn't become critical.
Precisely,
it wouldn't be critical.
Precisely. So what we are talking about, you have productivity, and even the forerunner to that is the whole mechanism of tripartite social dialogue. Now, the thing with coming out, when you come off the field of play, you can no longer influence. You got to be on the field of play. You got to be in the game. And whilst I understand and appreciate the fact that the union, it may have been a culmination with the whole TDC, the way that was handled, to my mind, it's important to be at the table, because it's only at being at the table that you can begin to influence the kind of changes that you would like to see at the end of the day.
I'd seen a statement early in the day with the constitution of the NTAC that on this issue about how matters come to the table, and it was said that, a matter can't come there where you have negotiations that are stalled, I think it was in the context of the Petrotrin negotiations at the time, unless both of the parties agree to bring the matter there. But in this case, with the decision to close down the TDC, you think that it was in the government's prerogative to bring that matter, because it was not a matter in negotiation.
No.
This is what the government had intended to do.
My understanding of the information that came in the public domain is that there was a failure to consult. And I know, again, this word consultation continues to evade a lot of what it means to you. It may not mean to me, and all the rest of it. My understanding
from what we know, there was no consultation.
Right. Or as
However
Mr.
you
Remy
call it.
said, just before making the announcement, he got a call before the minister went into Parliament.
She said she was calling to tell him that they were going to make this announcement in a post-cabinet meeting, and
you
this is
just
the
don't
announcement.
do that. Once you have a recognized majority union, it is incumbent upon the employer to have a conversation. Let me hasten to add, invariably, it does not change, it may not change the desired outcome.
Yeah.
But you know what? If I sit with you, and the fact that I'm about to make some substantial changes, why can't I sit down, produce the facts, produce the evidence in support of the proposed action, but recognizing that you as key stakeholder and I have an obligation under the law to at least have a conversation with you
And
on the matter.
in this case, the government, to my mind, never successfully rebutted the allegation that there was a document being discussed purporting to be developing, to arriving at a position on a future for the TDC, and workers were involved in participating in that discussion, so that they were going along a line expecting that there would be discussions about the future of the company to be hit with a decision that the company is closed down. The government has never effectively rebutted that.
Yeah. And I think that is what probably added some fuel to the fire, which resulted in Mr. Remy, taking such strong action. As I said, I was not there. I'm just dealing with what came out in the public domain.
But overall, you think, and there are other interests in the country who have felt that, okay, that having been the case, enough time has passed for a resumption of discussions around the table, because we're in a situation now where we need more peace, rather, as you say, talking with here rather than talking against and standing against.
No, and I agree with that. When you're in a leadership role, at times, notwithstanding some of the difficulties, and you could be bloody right at the end of the day, but you want to be able, in the interest of the whole, to find a way to move forward. Now, again, what I'm hearing again in the public domain is that there are some preconditions being established in order for the return. Now, is it that you require a conciliator or someone to conciliate before, so that the National Tripartite Council continues to be a non-crisis forum, as you indicated earlier, so you don't, unless there is bilateral agreement between parties, you do not bring matters to that forum unless there is agreement between parties. And it's a forum where my understanding is that you really need to meet and treat with key economic, social issues and challenges, which at the end of the day would, if treated in the way it ought to be treated, would hopefully lead Trinidad and Tobago out of the situation. I mean, we're back to the whole thing about, as we spoke earlier, the whole question about productivity. And in my research, Andy, I can tell you, there's no shortage of information. Over the last couple of days, I went back and I looked at Mr. Cabrera's, Vincent's comments.
Yeah, you put out a perspective on it.
A perspective. And the thing about it is, when I look at it, because I'm not one to dwell on problems, I am about solutions and so on. And what are the key points coming out of his commentary? The criticism of low productivity being placed at the doorstep of the trade union movement. There's no evidence. Okay? The suggested move to adopt a concept of total productivity factor. Now, we all know that productivity measures and so on, you do have some complications. It is not as straightforward as some people. The labor type is much simpler. But when you talk about the total factor productivity, you're really referring to input factors that are much more complex, knowledge and that kind of thing. But you know what I got from, at the end of the day, what I found instructive in Vincent's commentary is that we all agree, we are agreeing that there are gaps that need to be closed.
Yeah.
And the fact that we agree based on what I read from his commentary, so let's now, what do we do? What are the next steps? How do we move forward? And in my research, I discovered a document, not just the compact document, the social compact that was signed in 2000, but more specifically, a document that was done by labeled National Productivity Enhancement Strategy paper for Trinidad and Tobago. And I can tell you, having reviewed this document, most of the answers are here. This goes back to 2005. And more importantly, the ECA was one of the driving forces, having hosted a symposium on the said topic back in 2005, partnering with the ILO and other key social partners, which gave rise to this document. And it is, I can tell you, a top quality document. So let me hasten to add, I therefore have to ask the question, why haven't we been able to move this forward?
Implement it. What is standing in the way? And as I said, the ECA, given its mandate, will take the lead on this. Take the lead on this. His point is that in the absence of real data and metrics and so on, his position, he said it on the rally at that march on August 4th, and he's saying it in the position he's advanced, that workers are as productive in Trinidad and Tobago as they can be, and unless somebody could provide data to show otherwise, that is his position.
Yeah, but again, Andy, I'm of the firm belief that is not good enough. Yes, there may be an absence of data, but does that make it right?
Yeah.
What do we do therefore? Are we going to continue to dwell on that?
His position is that it is for employers to prove otherwise, and to put in place what is required for measuring it and for determining whether or not.
No, let me again hasten to add that employers, business organizations do employ productivity measures because it's an integral part of your performance management system. If you are using the balanced scorecard methodology, for example, and you're developing objectives and so on, there must be a linkage to the whole concept of productivity, because that the desired outcome is that the inputs, okay, must be able to drive the outputs, okay? Now, what I found interesting again, is that we don't need to go very far. Barbados, for example, they did some stuff which they ought to be commended for. And I tell you, if Barbados did not do what they did together with social partners, the tripartite mechanism, 10 or 15, 20 years ago, they would have been down the chute by now.
About 2009, it was called a social compact.
Precisely. And they took, collectively, they decided to take a particular course of action, implemented specific strategies in order for the whole, in the national interest of Barbados. When I look at Singapore...
But what do you think makes for the difference in approach to national unity and cohesion in Barbados as opposed to Trinidad and Tobago?
A keener sense of nationalism and pride. I mean, it's no secret.
Because they have trade unions, they
Of
have
course,
they have
of course,
employers,
of course.
and you have other
Yeah, you have the
social
same,
partners.
a similar
You have government.
construct. But they came together and stuck to the task, and worked together. I'm not suggesting for one moment that there may not have been bumps on the road, but like everything else, if you keep your eyes on that goal, which is, as a people, what is in the best interest of our people. And that is what has brought them thus far.
Yeah, I see you have a copy of
Yeah,
Dr. Farah's book, We Like It
right.
So. And his central thesis that makes that difference is that whereas there is trust among the stakeholders and the social partners in Barbados that helps move forward movement and these things, there's a total absence of trust among stakeholders in Trinidad and Tobago. And it won't be easy to arrive
Right.
at.
And those are the fundamentals, those are the foundation pillars of tripartism. Trust, respect. Whether you call it tolerance, whether in that tolerance, respect for each other. What is all this about? I'm totally amazed. But as you refer to Dr. Farrell's We Like It So, his more recent publication, The Cultural Roots of Economic Underachievement in Trinidad and Tobago, because I felt I needed to get a sense from someone, is it cultural? And the answer pretty much is yes, okay? Because productivity is really a state of mind. And he compared, now in terms of statistics, we have two set of statistics based on research that we have. We have one done by some guys out of the university, Factors Affecting Construction Labor Productivity in Trinidad and Tobago, the Journal of Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago. That was done back in 2014. And
This is 3 years ago.
actually, the results are similar to what Dr.
That what he's saying
Farrell
there.
is saying here. And he was comparing the construction site in Toronto versus that of Trinidad. And very powerful examples, just as
As an illustration.
yeah. He said, I spent many hours working out of my apartment on Charles Street, from that's in Toronto, which elevated?
Downtown Toronto,
Downtown Toronto, okay? The first thing I noticed was that the day's work was planned and organized. Every worker seemed to be assigned a clear and specific task and went about that task diligently. Supervision was present and clearly identifiable. They consulted drawings and so on. And he went on and on, right? I marveled at the level of organization and discipline, okay? The contrast, now in contrast, he's saying, could not be more stark as I observed in the early 1980s in the construction of my own home and the Ministry of Finance and Central Bank's 20-story towers. On Trinidad and Tobago work sites, workers are rarely alone doing a specific task. They clump together, remaining close enough to facilitate conversations. Whenever possible, they do tasks serially to maximize interaction and worker demand for conversation. So, it is reasonable to conclude that the relative impact of culture on the whole thing. Another interesting aspect in the said document, where it refers to the Asian model. This is back in Rome in 1959.
Yeah.
The European Productivity Agency formulated that productivity is above all a state of mind. It is an attitude that seeks the continuous improvement of what exists. It is a conviction that one can do better today than yesterday, and that tomorrow will be better than today.
Yeah.
Another aspect of that, likewise, the Asian Productivity Organization states that productivity is the belief in human progress. It is a state of mind which aims at perpetual movement. It is a ceaseless effort to apply new technology and new methods for the welfare and happiness of mankind. It is the training of the minds and the development of attitudes of the people as a whole, which determines whether the nation will realize high productivity and an affluent life, or low productivity and poverty. So it's not that there's a shortage of good quality information and people who have already gone through the same.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
want to ask you, though,
Sure.
if you think we have not, my sense is that among social partners, we have not we have not evolved in the sense that, let's say, 40 years ago, when I was entering the world of work, and you have this thing about employers and employees and trade unions and the government, the environment was such that the chairman of the ECA would not be somebody looking like you. The chief executive officer of Massey would not have been somebody looking like Gervais Warner. And so you had a different kind of dynamic. It seems as though, I'm saying that to say that I heard Mr. Remy of the CWU yesterday on another radio station talking about his suspicion that some aspect of government dealings seem to be favoring the Massey group, as though something is wrong with that. And I'm asking the question, well, who is the Massey group? And does the Massey group not employ thousands of people in Trinidad and Tobago who look like us and like him? And that a lot of, I know a lot of people who look like us and like him who have moved into the middle class by virtue of working with the Massey group. And is that not, is the Massey group not a Trinidad and Tobago enterprise, the benefit to whom will benefit others like us in Trinidad and Tobago? So what's the problem? And we stuck in that kind of thinking about, so Massey is a big employer, and therefore something is wrong with that.
And to be quite honest, I see nothing wrong with Massey and many other organizations. And you know what? In 2017, those kind of conversations, I just find it of nuisance value. I know it exists, as we saw recently last week, okay, out in Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay? But you know what? This is a diverse society. You know, the Caribbean people, you know, we are diverse. And as a consequence of which, you know, I am the firm belief that we have long gone past, even with the whole question of immigration. You know, where recently I saw somebody called me about an ad that was placed, you know, and I said, you know, we are a diverse country, and this is something that happens across the globe, you know. So what is wrong with having people? And as a matter of fact, you know, there are jobs that our people either refuse to do or not interested in doing. And I'm just saying that not to digress, but you know, to make the point that this is about diversity, and what we need to do as a people is really managing the impact of diversity. Okay, it's real. It's like globalization. You know, you don't worry and try to fight with globalization. You work with it.
Find ways to adapt
Find
to it
ways to
and make the best of it for
so
yourself. All right, so let's come back to the question of the imperative for social peace and social dialogue in the country in our current circumstances. And so you said earlier that you get the sense that there are demands for conditions for a return to the table, and that those demands are coming from the trade unions. Mm-hmm. The Prime Minister is on record as having said, well, let's get back to where we talk. But the trade union leaders are saying that they have sent a request to him and he has not responded. But
well, I mean, I can't, I wouldn't be so fast and out of place to speak for the Prime Minister, but I'm just, if it were me, I would in fact, without preconditions, because I think enough time has passed, without very firm preconditions, I would continue to use moral suasion to get intact, get the forum back on. Now it may require some renegotiating of the terms. You may need to revisit
terms of engagement.
The terms of engagement, because one can logically and reasonably conclude that trust was absent.
One of them, somebody has put on the table, and it is a question that I put to the Minister of Labour. She's responded in a piece that should come out in the next couple of days, that the chairmanship of the NTAC be one in which it rotates.
Of
so
course
that
it should.
it sort of improves the principle of tripartism. So for some period it is Labour, some period it is government, some
Sure,
period it is...
sure,
and she
sure.
said it is a workable proposal given how it is put down.
Yeah,
so
and
so
it's
she's
not
against it.
unreasonable, because what that does is, in fact, one, hopefully raises the bar in terms of the conversation, okay, and brings some level of balance to the forum. So you're not only focused on what is of interest, you know, and a lot of sectoral interests and so on. We need to be able at that forum to transcend. So when we get there, we got to find ways to move away whilst recognizing that we have personal interests and so on, or interests or ideologies and so on that we would come with, or philosophies. But that forum, that tripartite forum, is one where, you know, we got to move away from, work around the adversarial histories that, as we know it, rebuild the foundation on which the whole thing evolved.
What do you think ought to happen if the Prime Minister says, well, come back to the table rather than shouting insults and accusations across the divide? And they say, well, look, okay, so we say yes, we're ready, but then you haven't responded. What do you think has to happen?
I think, given again what is out in the public, because let me hasten to add, I have not yet been called to, my organization has nominated as the chairman to sit on NTAC. I haven't gotten the organization hasn't received any confirmation on that. We are waiting for that. And I guess they're probably waiting until the forum can be reestablished.
Reestablished and reconvened.
You know, yeah. But again, someone, and I saw, is it Reggie Dumas, offered to bring parties back together, maybe as a suggestion, for him to have a conversation with the leadership of the trade union movement to get a sense and a better understanding, you know, of what the real issues are. We know it's about trust. Because you don't want that to come back onto the platform that will comprise the discussion.
Yeah. Maybe it is for somebody who has the responsibility to do that to call him to say, well, okay, you legitimize his proposal, and then it will start.
Because
there.
I think he has, I know he has the credibility, he has tremendous experience in this regard, and I really see no reason why, because again, as a country, we cannot continue the way we are going.
Yeah. What opportunities do you think are being foregone, are being allowed to go by the way while we continue to be this way where we are disjointed and not having these national conversations?
Well, again, opportunities to rebuild the economy, opportunities to make the kind of decisions that are required at this time in order to help us through that. I mean, Petrotrin, for example, we are built on primarily a fairly substantial portion of our GDP comes out of energy.
Yep. Oil and gas.
And we keep talking about diversification, but successive governments have not been in a position to really move away from just a slogan, you know, let's diversify, you know. And it could be that so much we already have the infrastructure set up, and we have the skills and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, probably successive governments may be saying, boy, if we decide finally to move away and diversify, begin that process, which is a journey, is not going to come overnight.
Yeah.
It means attitudes, it means behavioral changes, and all the rest of it. Do we have the strength? Do we have the conviction to influence those kind of behavioral changes that are required? Maybe not. And this is why we have been talking about diversifying for the last 30 years, and we have not moved beyond that. Or God is a Trini, and being a Trini, some glimmer of hope is going to happen.
All will be well,
All
regardless.
will be well, regardless, at some point in time. But why not begin the process? Because is it that the Juniper platform, which gives us a glimmer of hope?
Respite.
Yeah. Is it that we're going to, notwithstanding, is it that we are going to continue with the same kind of approach and attitude and not do some belt tightening, not exercise the level of discipline that is required? I mean, maybe one of the things is if you remove some of those subsidies,
Yeah.
and I know that's a conversation. I know that
It's difficult policy decision.
yeah,
for
policy
government
decision.
to make.
And for this, you were asking again about coming back to your original question. You really need, and that's again as part of the whole tripartite social conversation, you really need policies that are multi-pronged, that has a reach. Because what about conversations like youth employment? What about that segment of the society? We can no longer afford to ignore that. So you have that, okay? You have the issue of crime, okay? You have so many, and it is not difficult, but where's the consciousness?
Yeah, I want you to respond to the trade union movement's pushback against what they see as unnecessary retrenchment and displacement of workers on the one hand, and the continuation of I would say unjustified unjustified profits being reported. They take issue with those things and saying that you can't be showing that on the one hand and then making cases for retrenchment and layoffs.
Well, Andy, it is said that the private sector is the engine of growth, okay, and they pretty much drive growth. But driving growth, you got to drive growth through people,
Yeah.
okay, and that's where the trade union movement is saying, look, this is about part of this. We have a big stake in this because our people, their lives, and so on are committed to this. But profits and productivity, although there is some relationship to some extent, it is not, if you are productive, or if you are profitable, it means that you are productive, okay, or as productive as you should be, and it works vice versa. I had a note somewhere here where I in fact spoke to that. The whole question of total factor productivity, as I said earlier, organizations do have productivity measures, okay? I'm trying to find it here. Oh, here I have it. Where he said he spoke about the level of profits and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Where employers do measure productivity, or if it's done in the bank. Well, it's done in the banking sector as an example. Yeah. I mean, one cannot use increased profit as an indicator of increased worker productivity. The corollary to this is that loss-making companies or companies with declining profits are an indicator of decreasing worker productivity.
Yeah.
So I think, Andy, at the end of the day, as a social partner and maybe to widen the net a bit. You know, the net needs widening because there are a lot of groups who are not being spoken for in this conversation.
Yeah.
You know, so it should be tripartite plus as it relates to some of these conversations. You have the informal sector.
The whole NGO sector, the informal
NGO,
sector.
right?
And, yeah.
The informal sector, which is pretty much a growing sector and growing pretty rapidly, okay? You have the graduates coming out of university. Who is speaking on their behalf?
Yeah.
You know, who is speaking on behalf of the youth?
People entering or seeking to enter the workforce.
Precisely.
That's a whole community
Yeah.
there, right?
You
away.
know.
But what I wanted to get at, let's go staying to this question about profit declaring on the one hand and hardship declaring on the others. Take the Answer McCall, Guardian Media as an element in Answer McCall. Answer McCall is posting profits, although saying that the figure represents a 19% fall off in what they had projected. But at the same time, in a part of that group, they're laying off workers. How do you contextualize it? And what is it that those people who respond to that negatively may be missing?
Yeah. Well,
Because business is in the business to make profit.
Sure.
And you can't deny that.
Sure.
So that posting, and in some cases, if you're publicly listed, you have to declare. And so that declaring profits on the one hand and sending home workers on the other seems to be oxymoronic for some people.
Yeah. Misaligned. Well, you know, we are in an era now that requires, and I'm going to come back to the whole question of retrenchment and all the rest of it. And I think retrenchment, as the ECA has been articulated, that should be the last resort. And I think the Honorable Minister of Labour also articulated retrenchment should be the last resort. But it goes right back to the fundamentals of labor management cooperation, labor management relationship, you know, whereby if we work together, if we agree on this whole process of social dialogue, even outside of difficult times, when we get to these challenging times, then there would be the fundamentals of trust, respect, and all the rest of it. In terms of retrenchment and profitability, I think that is where an important conversation must be had at the tripartite level. And that's one of the items on the agenda.
Those are the things that have
Those
to
are
be
the things that
there.
need to be discussed there, because it's going to require, okay, what employers are going to say. If it is that you're tying my hands, okay, I'm investing my capital, therefore, what can I get in return? I need a productive workforce, yeah? I need people who are skilled, okay? And I have no problem, I would have no problem in retooling as necessary, because you are in an environment now, a global environment where we're talking ICT, we're talking about robotics, okay? And we're talking about digitization at source and all the rest of it. These are real. And if we are to become competitive, because we're not just competing in Trinidad, or we're not competing in the region.
Yes.
We are competing, we got to prepare to compete extra regionally, you know. So, to answer your question, Andy, that is the conversation that we need to have.
To be having.
Do we, because there's no money, okay? There isn't the level of disposable income and all the rest of it. Because, as I said in my paper there also, is to create that circular flow of money.
But you don't think that maybe just on the surface there's still a great deal of what is called conspicuous consumption going on?
Boy, I tell you.
New cars are rolling off the lot.
Yep.
With
expensive.
With no relaxation in the rapidity of it.
And this is why I was looking at let me use Barbados as an example. Okay? In some of the measures that they would have taken. Barbados. maintenance of stable industrial relations climate, sustainable expansion of the economy through its competitiveness. The specific strategies employed: implementation of a general wage freeze, tie increases in wages and salaries to productivity gains, okay? And that's just two of some very specific strategies. But this conversation can only be had between tripartite partners who trust and respect each other at that forum. When you look at Singapore, to which I was referring, I mean, you know, we always refer back in the 80s and so on, the Singaporean model, you know, send people out there and so on. Lee Kuan Yew decided, here's what, this country, this is where, and he led.
He imposed certain kinds of conditions.
He imposed, and today, you know, so they introduced a total productivity approach, okay? And how? The government took a decision supported by the National Trade Union Center of Singapore to implement a policy of holding down wages to lower labor costs and attract investments. This policy lasted for just over 3 years. Okay, and that's one. Stimulated the economy through increased infrastructure development expenditure. Okay, they reduced statutory charges to businesses. As the country's largest employer, the government took the lead in curbing wage inflation.
You think that is a necessity in the Trinidad and Tobago market of today, 2017, imposing wage restraints?
It has to, Andy. There is no way that we can continue as a country to have year on year or every 3 years 15%, 20%, 10% and all the rest of it. But again, it is not about the level of adjustment or the alignment of reward and incentive to performance. Yeah? More than it is, how can we get into the psyche of our people, okay, who sit on the tripartite council? How can we, who represent different partners, social partners, how can we get that conversation going?
I want to tell you an inside story, my experience in the 5 years between 2010 and 2015. There was what appeared to be an attempt at approaching a kind of wage consensus. Certainly, let's use the public sector as a means to test it, whether or not there was in effect a 5% cap, as it was called at the time. Right. It was something that was being tested. But I want to tell you that it is my conclusion that there were people in and around the cabinet, working in the government, who weren't committed to that themselves.
Yeah. And you know, let me just step back a bit. When I said earlier in the conversation that we do have good quality information, and I spoke about the national productivity back 2005. Even before that, Promalco predated that, which was work promotion of management and labor cooperation. That's back in 2001 to 2005. That was a program under the auspices of the ILO, bringing social partners together. And you know what? Promalco advocated and facilitated the establishment of national institutions based on partnerships for promoting productivity through social dialogue.
It was driven by a man named Dr. Andre Vincent Henry.
Precisely.
You hardly even hear about him now.
Precisely.
He's probably become frustrated and gone somewhere.
Right. So what are we talking about? In terms of the result, Promalco contributed considerably to positively changing the operation, the operating culture of zero-sum workplace relations to more collaboration and cooperation, to the extent that the number of enterprises have included specific references to the principles advocated by this Promalco.
Right, so that was 10 years ago. So we knew, and before that and since then, we knew what was required to be done and to be taking place.
I mean, this document, which, I mean, when they provided me with this, National Productivity Enhancement Strategy People for Trinidad and Tobago, the ECA conducted a stakeholder symposium with the support of the ILO, okay, back between the 18th and 19th April 2005, and outlined all of the factors influencing productivity at the national level and at the enterprise level. It analyzed the situation, the current state in Trinidad and Tobago. It provided, out of that work, it provided the strategy to go forward. And I am looking at this over the last day or two, and I'm saying, my God, what?
It's not that we don't know what we are required to be doing.
So you know, I mean, it went on to speak about the fact in its none of these priority policy areas have received any great amount of attention since being agreed to in October 2000. That's the compact. And if you recall, I sat on that social dialogue on tripartite prior to the
2014.
14, okay?
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. That, at that forum, I mean, a lot of good quality work was done. And again, I'm asking, why do we have, and as a matter of fact, I led the employer segment of it. And when I recognized, having reviewed the Compact 2000, I said to them, including Andrew Sabga was part of that.
Yeah.
Okay? I said, colleagues, what I'm seeing here, this Compact document 2000, we don't need to reinvent this wheel. So you know what happened? Because we didn't want to continue to say, we're talking about, we are using the said document. Under, I think Basdeo Pandey was the Prime Minister back then.
In 2000, yes.
We put another label on it, partnering for something. But the contents remain the same.
So your outgoing comment, of necessity, we have to go back there, around that table.
Precisely. We must go back, because that's where the game is going to be played.
There's no option.
There's no option. The how, as I said,
to find the means by which to do it.
Precisely.
And
you may want to get, and you know, in closing, I was just looking at a piece that was done. I did the Jubilee celebration of independence message, when we spoke about the kind of success, right? And the more recently, the 4x400 men's relay, the discipline, the commitment. I mean, we understand the level of training, and it's not one day, it is every day, whether you feel like or not. But again,
so we keep demonstrating that we have the capacity at the individual, at the institutional, at the national level to do these things.
Precisely.
That's the point.
So why is it we are not seeing the desired outcome? Why is it we are not seeing it? So again, Andy, just to wrap up, there's no shortage of quality information, as I pointed out, okay, as evidence of these documents, Promalco and this National Productivity Enhancement Strategy paper. You know, we need to get back to the table. We need to get back to the table. The how, as I said again, you may want to ask Mr. Dumas, you know.
There has to be a mechanism to bring it back there. Keston Nancoo, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're listening to Impact T&T on this Sunday morning. Stay with us.